Somewhere in the Roman record, around the year 108, one of the most feared fighting units in the entire empire simply stops. 5,000 men, a whole legion, its name carved in confident letters into stone at their great fortress in the north of Britain. And then, nothing. No final report, no roll of the fallen, no triumph, and no recorded disaster. One of Rome's proudest legions is there in the documents, and then it is not, and nobody ever wrote down why. This is the story of the 9th Legion, and of the oldest and strangest disappearing act in the history of the Roman army. An entire legion that seems to march into the fog of northern Britain and never march back out. The northern edge of the Roman world was a cold, wet, unforgiving place. Rain most days, wind coming in hard off the moors, and a horizon that dissolved into grey. Out there, at the very limit of everything Rome had built, stood a fortress called Iberacum, the place we now call York, and behind its walls lived a machine made of men, because that is really what a Roman legion was, not a mob of warriors, a machine. Around 5,000 professional soldiers, trained until marching and building and fighting were almost the same motion, able to throw up a fortified camp every single night on the march, able to build the roads they walked on as they walked them. Rome did not just conquer with the spear, it conquered with the shovel, the survey line, and an almost frightening appetite for order. A man who signed on gave away the next 25 years of his life to it. He was paid, he was fed, and he was drilled without mercy. And in return, he became part of something that could outmarch, outbuild, and simply outlast almost any enemy the ancient world could put in front of it. Cowardice was punished hard. Loyalty was rewarded with land and coin at the end of a long career, if a man lived to see the end of it. And at the heart of every legion was one object that mattered more than any man inside it. A standard topped with an eagle of gilded metal, catching whatever light the north could offer. The Romans called it the Aquila. A single soldier carried it, and his one job was to make sure it never fell into enemy hands, because to lose the eagle was not simply a defeat. It was a wound to the soul of the whole legion, a shame that could follow it for generations. If you want to know how deeply this ran, look back to the year 9, when 3 entire legions walked into a forest in Germany and did not come out, and their eagles were taken. The Emperor Augustus, it is said, would knock his head against the doorframes of his palace, crying out for the general to give him back his legions. 3 eagles gone into the trees, and an emperor left pacing his rooms in the dark. To Rome, that was close to unthinkable. An eagle stood for the honor, the history, the very identity of every man who marched beneath it. Rome never quite forgot a lost eagle. Hold on to that idea. It matters later. The 9th, our legion, carried a proud second name of its own, Hispana, the Spanish. It had earned that title generations earlier, fighting in the mountains of what is now Spain, and by the time it turns up in Britain, it is already an old, hard, experienced formation, with a long memory of difficult campaigns behind it. These were not raw recruits. These were men whose fathers and grandfathers had carried that same eagle in that same formation across frontier after frontier. And I want to be honest with you about something. The 9th was not, by every measure, a lucky legion. Rewind to the year 60, or perhaps 61, to one of the most dangerous moments Rome ever faced on the island. A queen of the Iceni named Boudica had risen against Roman rule, and half of Britain rose with her. Roman towns were being left in ash, and into the middle of this firestorm marched part of the 9th, under a commander named Cerealis, hurrying to relieve a burning settlement at Colchester. They never arrived in good order. The column was caught in the open by a vast rebel host, and the foot soldiers of the 9th were broken almost completely. Cerealis himself escaped only by wheeling back with his cavalry to the safety of a fort. It was a catastrophe, and it was a warning. This legion had already once been shattered on British soil and pieced back together afterwards. The North remembered these things. There is a lesson buried in that revolt that we tend to forget, sitting comfortably where we do. To the Romans, Britain was the edge of the map. This was their frontier, their wild place, the last stop before the unknown, and nothing about it ever felt truly tamed. And here is where I will hand you my own opinion, because I have one, and you may not share it. I do not think the far north of this island was ever going to be held. Not really. You could send legions marching up into those hills and win every battle you fought and still lose to the land itself, to the bogs and the mist and the endless cold, and to a people who could simply melt into the high country and wait you out. If you think Rome, given enough time and enough men, could eventually have swallowed the whole island right up to the top, then say so down in the comments and make your case. I would enjoy reading it. But if you think, as I do, that some places simply cannot be conquered, then this one is for you, and you already know which button says so. Because everything that happens next turns on that single question. Can the far north be held? Rome, of course, was about to try anyway. A governor named Agricola drove his legions further north than any Roman had gone before, up into the country the Romans called Caledonia, the mountainous land we now call Scotland. Somewhere in the far reaches of it, around the year 83 or 84, he brought the northern tribes to a great battle at a place the Romans named Mons Graupius, and he won it. Thousands of the Caledonians were lost that day. But here is the thing that still gives me pause. Before that battle, the Roman historian Tacitus puts a speech into the mouth of a Caledonian leader named Calgacus, describing exactly what Roman conquest felt like from the other side. They create a wilderness, he has him say, and they call it peace. Whether any real Caledonian ever spoke those words, we cannot know. But it may be the most honest line about empire ever written, and the man who wrote it was a Roman. And even that victory rang strangely hollow. Agricola sent his fleet sailing right around the top of Britain, proving for the first time beyond any doubt that this really was an island, ringed on every side by cold, grey sea. His men had reached the very roof of the known world. And then, almost as quickly, Rome pulled back. The forts crept south again. The far north was won on the field and then, quietly, let go, because holding it cost far more than the empty glens would ever be worth. Rome could reach the north. Rome could never seem to keep it. Let me take you now to the last solid ground we have. The final piece of hard, datable evidence that the 9th Legion existed and stood in Britain is a single slab of stone from their fortress at York, carved around the year 108. Picture the mason bent over it, chisel and mallet in hand, cutting the legion's name and the emperor's titles into the rock in those careful, squared-off letters the Romans loved, recording that the great gate of the fortress had just been rebuilt in stone. A completely ordinary act. A building record, nothing more. The man carving it had not the faintest idea that his work would become the last clear footprint of 5,000 soldiers. And after that stone, the trail of the 9th simply goes cold. We know that in the years just after, the north of Britain turned dangerous again. There are hints scattered through the sources of serious trouble, of the province slipping out of Roman control, of losses that were never fully explained. A later Roman biography, looking back on the very start of Hadrian's reign, says plainly that the Britons could no longer be kept under Roman control. That is a remarkable thing for an empire to admit. Something had gone badly wrong at the top of this island, badly enough to reach the ears of Rome itself. And around the year 122, the Emperor Hadrian himself came to Britain and made a decision that told everyone precisely how bad things had become. He ordered a wall, not a symbolic line in the turf, a genuine barrier of stone running clean across the neck of the island, coast to coast, roughly 73 miles of it, studded with forts and gates and ditches. Along its whole length ran small fortlets, one at every Roman mile, with watchtowers set between them, and behind the entire thing a second great earthwork, so that the wall was never really one line at all, but a deep, layered zone of watching and control. Historians still argue about what it was truly for: a shield thrown up against invasion, or a customs barrier, a way to watch and tax and filter every soul who tried to cross. Perhaps in the end it was always both. Either way, it was built facing north, toward the exact country that had just swallowed our legion's trail. You do not raise something like Hadrian's Wall because your frontier is peaceful. You raise it because something out there has frightened the most powerful empire on earth. And it is precisely here, in this gap, in this uneasy silence behind a brand new wall, that the great legend was born. The story goes like this. Somewhere around this very time, the 9th Legion, 5,000 strong, was ordered north, up past the frontier, into the mists of Caledonia, to put down a rising among the tribes. They marched out of the light of the Roman world, and they were never seen again. No survivors staggering home, nothing recovered, no eagle returned. Just 5,000 of Rome's finest, swallowed whole by the fog and the heather, and the vast silence of the Scottish hills, as if the land itself had closed its jaws around them and quietly refused to give them back. No word ever came south. No messenger, no straggler, no rumor that anyone could pin down. Just an absence where a legion used to be, and a frontier that had gone very, very quiet. I will admit it freely, it is a magnificent story. It is the kind of thing that lodges in your imagination and never really leaves. And it inspired novels, and it inspired films, whole generations of people picturing that doomed column melting into the grey. There is only one small problem with it. It is almost certainly not what happened. Here is where the historians walk in and very gently take the legend apart. Because the evidence, when you actually chase it, does not lead into the Scottish mist at all. It leads across the sea. In a Dutch town called Nijmegen, on the old Rhine frontier, archaeologists found roof tiles, ordinary clay building tiles, stamped with the mark of the 9th Legion Hispana. Stamped, in other words, with the name of the very unit that supposedly perished in Caledonia. And these tiles appear to date to after the Legion's last known appearance in Britain. Sit for a moment with what that means. It suggests the 9th did not fall on some lonely Scottish hillside at all. It suggests the Legion left Britain, alive and intact, was carried right across the empire, and went on serving somewhere else entirely. Roman legions made their own bricks and tiles, and they pressed their name into the wet clay before firing it, the way a proud workshop stamps its work. Centuries on, that little mark becomes a fingerprint, a way of proving a particular unit once stood in a particular place. And the fingerprints of the 9th turn up on the wrong side of the sea, long after the Legion was supposed to be gone. Even this is argued over, I should say, but it is real, physical evidence, and it points firmly away from Scotland, not into it. And that, I have to say, is the detail I find stranger and more wonderful than the legend itself. One of the most romantic mysteries in all of history, the doomed legion lost in the northern fog, quietly undone not by some dramatic new discovery, but by a stack of old roof tiles in the Netherlands. If you have ever suspected that the small, boring, overlooked things tend to outlast the grand and glorious ones, well, there is your proof, pressed into fired clay. I would genuinely love to know where you think those men ended up once they sailed away from our shores. Wherever you imagine that road finally led them, tell me down below, because the honest truth is, nobody actually knows. And that is the moment this turns from a tidy legend into a real, unsolved mystery. Because the tiles answer one question and crack open a far larger one. If the ninth did not vanish in Scotland, then where and when did it truly meet its end? The trail after those tiles grows faint and treacherous. Some historians suspect the legion was later sent east into the great Jewish revolt in Judea in the 130s, a bitter and enormously costly war for Rome, where whole units were ground down to nothing. It was one of the fiercest wars Rome ever fought, and at least one other legion seems to simply drop out of the records around the very same time, which tells you how costly that fighting was. Others believe the ninth went further still and was destroyed on the eastern frontier around the year 161, when a Roman army was lured deep into Armenia and lost. There is a strange footnote to that eastern catastrophe. One ancient writer, with real venom in his pen, claims that a celebrated oracle seller of the age had promised the Roman commander an easy and glorious victory. Shortly before that commander led his men into exactly the opposite. If the ninth truly ended out there, then it may have marched to its final campaign on the word of a fashionable fortune teller. I find that almost unbearably human. The greatest army in the world, undone in part by wishful thinking. We do not know which of these, if either, holds the answer. But here is the single fact that closes the case and keeps it open at the very same time. When the Romans, later in that same century, drew up a list of all the legions that made up their army, the ninth simply was not on it. It was gone. Somewhere between that stone at York and that list in Rome, an entire legion of 5,000 professional soldiers slipped out of the empire and out of the record, and no surviving Roman voice tells us the story of its final day. We do not know the battlefield. We do not know the year. We do not even know the country. We only know that the ninth was, and then that it was not. To me, that is far more haunting than any legend of the fog could ever be. A legion does not need to vanish into mist to be lost forever. It can vanish into paperwork, into silence, into the plain, ordinary failure of anyone ever bothering to write the ending down. And yet, the story would not stay buried. That is the strange second life of the ninth. In the 1860s, at Silchester in southern England, on the site of a long-lost Roman town, someone dug a small bronze eagle out of the ground. It was not, in truth, a legion's sacred standard. It had come from a statue, but its discovery lit a fuse. Decades later, a writer named Rosemary Sutcliffe took that little bronze eagle and the mystery of the missing legion and wove them together into a novel about a young Roman traveling north beyond the wall to recover his father's lost eagle and to learn at last what had become of the ninth. That single book sent the legend racing around the world all over again. It reached cinema screens, it reached classrooms, it reached, very probably, you long before you ever clicked on this video. The history was shaky, but the story was immortal, and you can feel exactly why. A whole legion of hard, disciplined professional soldiers marching clean off the edge of the known world and never coming home is a story that seems to demand an ending. Our minds refuse to sit with a blank space that large. We fill it in ourselves with fog and heather and the last flash of a golden eagle going down. And that is the quiet magic of the whole thing. You can still walk long stretches of Hadrian's Wall today, out in that same cold northern wind, and stand where Roman sentries once peered into a darkness they never fully understood. The stones are worn smooth now, the ditches softened under grass, sheep grazing quietly where auxiliaries once kept their watch in the sleet. You can stand in the middle of York, over the buried stones of Iberacum, on the very ground where the Ninth once mustered. You can look at that small bronze eagle behind glass in a southern English museum and feel the tug of an entire legend built on top of it. Nearly 2,000 years of empires have risen and crumbled since Rome first came to these islands, and still we cannot stop asking the very same question those uneasy Roman commanders must once have asked themselves, staring down at an empty space on the muster roll. Where did they go? Maybe the answer is duller than any of us want it to be. A transfer, a reassignment, a hard war in a distant province, and an ending too routine for a single clerk to record. Empires are careless with their records when things go badly. Glory gets carved into stone and paraded through the capital. Defeats and quiet disbandments and awkward endings have a way of never quite getting written down at all. Or maybe, on some cold morning we will never date, in a country we will never name, the last men of the Ninth really did stand together one final time beneath their eagle, and the fog really did roll in over them. We will almost certainly never know. And perhaps that is the very reason they have never truly left us. I am the voice behind mystique history, and chasing shadows like this one across the centuries, hunting for the exact place where the record goes dark, is the whole reason I do what I do. If this vanished legion has got under your skin the way it has always got under mine, then stay close, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments what you truly believe happened to those 5,000 men. And while you are there, hand me the next ghost. Tell me which lost name, which forgotten army, which unsolved corner of the past you want me to walk into next. I read every single one of them. 5,000 men marched out of the light of history, and history for once simply forgot to write them home.